I'm going to show you how I fed my family these healthy and delicious weeknight meals last week. I began by setting up a meal plan, front-loading most of the effort on Sunday when I had the time, and turned it into dinners that came together with almost no effort during the week. So, if you're looking to eat healthy, non-boring weeknight dinners, this meal plan could work out. So I began Sunday morning by drafting a meal plan, and up first was the comforting Japanese katsu curry. To make it, I started with a couple of onions and sliced them up so they would partly melt in the curry. Then I took 3 potatoes and cut them into chunky cubes, keeping them roughly equal in size for even cooking. Next, I peeled 3 carrots and cut them into about 1-inch long pieces. And this right here is my cheat code to a proper Japanese curry, the golden curry mix. You can easily find it on Amazon, if not at an international grocery store near your house. Next up, I drizzled some olive oil in a hot pan. I added some onions with a pinch of salt to sweat them out. Then I added ginger garlic paste and gave it a stir. Next, toss in the potatoes and stir them around. Then I drop 2 quarters of curry block and stir until it melts down. I deglaze the pot with a splash of veg stock, top it up with water, and now it's got volume. Feel free to use chicken stock. I'm keeping it vegetarian for my wife. Next, I added the carrots and gave it another stir. While the curry simmered, I caught up with the cleaning because there's nothing that breaks your motivation in the kitchen than dirty counters and dishes piling up. When I got back to the pot, I added a cornstarch slurry to thicken this up just a bit, stirred and seasoned with salt and some honey. Finally, I tossed in frozen peas and gave it one more mix, and look at this beautiful thing. Wow, that tastes good. This would now go into storage in the fridge, so I packed this curry into 2 deli containers and moved them in. Next, I moved on to prepping the katsu cutlets, both paneer and chicken. For this, I lay out the chicken breast on parchment, slice them thin and wide, and pat them dry on a rack. I do the same with paneer, cutting it into long, even fingers. I pat the paneer dry too because moisture is the enemy of crisp. I set up a breading station, flour, whisked eggs, and panko breadcrumbs seasoned with salt, pepper, and parmesan. The parmesan gives that extra crunch and color to your katsu. I start with the paneer fingers, dredge them one by one in flour, then egg, and then panko. Once all the paneer is breaded, I pack them in freezer-safe box. I make sure they don't touch each other, and I separate layers with aluminum foil so they stay neat. I repeat the exact same process with chicken cutlets, flour, then egg, and then panko, and then pack them in a container just like the paneer. I slide the chicken into the freezer and clean up the counter to keep it all nifty. And right about then, I was craving some family time, so I hung out with the gang over some coffee, and we had some fun conversations. Alright, it's already 11:40 and I think it's a good idea to get to the black chicken. The plan was to eat the black chicken for lunch on Sunday and then again pair it with rice or dosa on Thursday night. Now this black chicken is a regional dish from Coorg, India. That's where my wife comes from. That said, this dish has 2 ingredients which might not be accessible to most of you, and so I'll try my best to give you closest substitutes that can help replicate the flavor. I started with seasoning the chicken with some salt in a steel bowl, and then I added the first key ingredient, the Coorg black vinegar, or as the locals call it, kachipuri. You can add a good quality malt vinegar instead as a substitute. I then rubbed the salt and the vinegar all over the chicken pieces and set it aside. Alongside, I did the exact same thing with paneer to cook the paneer version of this dish for my wife. Next, I chopped up a few onions, heated up 2 pans, one for paneer, one for chicken, and added oil in both. Once the oil was hot, I added cumin seeds, and once they were fragrant, I added the onions with a few pinches of salt. Once the onions turned slightly pink, I added some ginger garlic paste and gave it a stir. Then I added the chicken in one pan and paneer in the other, and both pans got a good stir. Meanwhile, I set the rice for cooking in my Instapot, and I always salt my rice before cooking for an even seasoning. Back to the black chicken, I now add the second key ingredient, the Coorg pork masala, and as you can guess, the dish originally calls for pork, but we are doing chicken and paneer versions of it. Since you are unlikely to have this very regional spice on your shelf, you can substitute it with a mix of cumin, coriander, turmeric, and chili powder. Now everything needs to get coated in that delicious spice mix. Deglaze with some water. Stock would have been better, but I was out of it. A drizzle of honey, lid on, and let it rest. Once the internal temperature of the chicken legs reaches above 180, it's done. To finish off the paneer, I added some frozen peas because why not? And then it was time to plate the lunch. Hot rice with some of that gorgeous black chicken and black paneer. And the leftovers go in the fridge for the weeknight. Alright, it's past 4 p.m. I just got up from a nap. Both the kids are still sleeping, and so that gives me some time to work on the fajitas and the Khao Suey curry base. With the black chicken done, next up was fajitas for the week. The idea was to batch cook them so that they can be easily topped up on tostadas or eaten in a wrap. For this, I sliced up some red, yellow and green bell peppers in long strips, then I sliced the onions along the longitudes. I mixed them up but separated them in 2 batches of the mix, you guessed it, one for paneer and one for chicken fajita. I then seasoned long sliced chicken breast with salt and my spice mix, that is, smoked paprika, ground cumin and garlic powder. I then added just a little sweet and acid for balance. I used honey and vinegar. You could use brown sugar and lemon juice if you like that flavor profile better. I did the exact same thing with paneer, long fingers and generous seasoning. Now when my cast iron pan was ripping hot, I added some olive oil and then the chicken. At this point, you want to let the chicken sit untouched for that flavorful Maillard browning. After some time, I gave it a quick stir, and once the chicken seemed just undercooked, I took it off the pan. I added the onions and the bell pepper mix to the same pan, incorporating that flavorful fond at the bottom, which gets released and mixed up by the water that the vegetables let out. After a few minutes, I add the chicken back and give it all a good mix and look at the browning on that chicken. When the fajitas were done, I let them cool and transferred them to deli containers, and the boxes went straight in the fridge to be consumed later in the week. Now at this point it was around 5:30 p.m. and my 4-year-old asked me if I could watch some cartoons with him. So I looked at the meal plan and my work calendar and decided to do a weeknight cooking for Khao on Monday since it wasn't all that hectic. The teriyaki was anyway going to be cooked fresh on Wednesday night. And the mission on Sunday was to lighten up my week with minimum stress around cooking throughout the week, which is largely accomplished. And with that, I said yes to my son and watched some cartoons. Later, we had some of those fajitas wrapped up with sour cream in some tortilla breads for dinner and called it a night. Now, I was really looking forward to the lunch on Monday because hey, Katsu curry. All I had to do was pull out the curry and katsu cutlets from the fridge. The cutlets were nice and separated. I had set some rice for cooking in the morning, which was now ready. I then put the cutlets in the air fryer, gave them a good spray of olive oil, and cooked it for 10 minutes at 375F. To plate, I put the rice on one side, curry on the other, and cutlets on top. And this beautiful lunch was ready in just 10 to 12 minutes tops. Next up was dinner, and it was Khao, which I could not prepare on Sunday, and I had to make enough for it to cover 2 meals. So I began by soaking some rice noodles in lukewarm water before anything else. Then I sliced some 5 onions and used my kitchen shears to cut up boneless, skinless chicken thighs into roughly equal pieces. I seasoned it with some salt and set it aside. Then I took these mushroom stems, soaked them in water and microwaved for about 5 minutes to make a quick mushroom stock. This would help with the veg version I was making for my wife. Next, I sliced up the mushroom heads and took out this store-bought Thai yellow curry paste because hey, let's be real, this is weeknight cooking and I'm not whipping up a curry paste made from 12 different ingredients. If you don't have a Thai curry paste, mixing up some ginger garlic paste with turmeric, cumin, coriander and chili powder should get you similar results to what I created, which is far from authentic but very, very tasty regardless. Next, I heated up 2 pots with some oil in and added the chicken to one and mushrooms to the other. I let the chicken get some browning and stirred the mushrooms enough to draw out the water from it. Then I added most of the sliced onions to both the pots, reserving some for topping the soup later on, and gave it all a stir. I added some ginger garlic paste and 3 tablespoons of that Thai curry paste. Next, I stirred to incorporate it all really well with the chicken and the onions. For the veg pot, I added the quick mushroom stock from the microwave and added some chicken stock I had made the previous week for chicken Khao. You could use bouillon paste or powder if you don't have stock, or just use some water to deglaze if you have none of it, because this ingredient right here is the most important, a generous amount of coconut milk. I'm using 500 ml for each pot. Give it all a stir. While the soup cooked, I added the reserved sliced onions to the air fryer, sprayed with some olive oil and set it up for browning for about 8 to 10 minutes at 375F. Back to the soup, I added some salt and sweet to season and gave it a taste test. Then I finished it off with a dash of my coconut vinegar, and yes, it might slightly break your soup because coconut milk, but I take that trade-off any day for the incredible boost it gives to the flavor profile. Now that the soup was ready and the onions were browned, I came back to my soaking rice noodles, which were now very soft, so I boiled them for about a minute and they were done. To garnish, I sliced and soaked some scallions in cold water to brighten them up, and it was time to plate. I added the noodles and the soup in a bowl and topped it up with the scallions and fried onions, and dinner was served. The fact that this 30-40 minutes of work can serve 3 mouths twice with this incredible dish feels like cheating, you guys. On Tuesday, we stepped out for an event to meet some family friends over lunch, and dinner was a no-brainer. Some tostadas topped with those fajitas I had made on Sunday. So I started off by cutting a few store-bought tortillas into quarters, putting them in the air fryer basket and spraying them with some olive oil. and that went in for about 10 minutes at 375F. Next, I whipped up some mayo, yogurt, garlic powder and sushi vinegar together to make a nice alternative to sour cream. You could use lemon juice or any vinegar if you don't have sushi vinegar. I then pulled out and heated the fajitas from the fridge, and in about 8 minutes the tortillas were brown and crisp. I let them cool on a wire rack so they get proper air circulation and get as crispy as they could. To assemble, I loaded up each tostada with generous amount of that delicious fajita and garlic yogurt sauce. I took a few bites for the camera and listened to that crunch. Oh. By the way, it's also a ton of fun for kids to assemble their own tostadas, so that's another reason to eat this. On Wednesday, we revisited the Katsu curry for lunch, and it was around 7:30 when I wrapped up work and headed over to the kitchen to start preparing the teriyaki dinner. I began with some skin-on boneless chicken thighs that I seasoned lightly with salt. I also cut some paneer into long fingers like so and let it sit in a teriyaki sauce mix that I'd put together earlier. More on the sauce mix in a bit. Next, I added the chicken thighs to a cold pan skin down and put it on medium heat to slowly render out the fat from the skin. If you leave it untouched, you do not need any extra oils to cook the chicken. Next, I sliced some broccoli and an onion to serve on the side. I used a metal spatula to flip the chicken pieces and cook them slightly on the other side until the internal temperature reached above 180 degrees Celsius. After which, I added the half-sliced onions and broccoli in the same pan with rendered fat and fond left behind by the chicken. When onions started to sweat a little, I drizzled some additional olive oil and gave it all a good mix. And then I added the paneer with the rest of the onions and broccoli to an air fryer basket to go in for about 6 to 7 minutes at 375F. Back to the pan, the vegetables were about done, so I finished them off with a few cranks of black pepper. I then took them out in a bowl, gave a final seasoning of salt, honey and vinegar and gave it all a good mix. Now these chicken thighs came out very nice. Hear this. I then sliced them into strips, keeping the skin down. That way the skin doesn't pull apart and fall off the meat. Next is the teriyaki sauce mix, which I made a couple of weeks ago, and a batch of this is always stored in my fridge. It's made of equal parts soy sauce, Han Marine and sake. Now if you're using a high quality Han Marine, it has enough sugar to maintain the sweetness. If not, you can adjust the sugar by adding some more. If you don't have Marine and sake, simply replace them with equal parts vinegar and brown sugar to achieve a non-traditional but good enough result. In any case, you must reduce and thicken your teriyaki sauce so that it gets that gloss and coats well on the chicken and the paneer. I reduced it a little bit and added a little cornstarch slurry after and boiled it all to a glossy finish. To plate, I served some white rice on one side of the plate and veggies on the other, stacked the paneer and chicken on top, skin up this time, and then poured some of that sauce over the chicken and paneer. To be honest, being an Indian, I find this dish equally comforting as rajma and rice. Thursday's lunch was a rotation of Khao Suey from the fridge. All I did was boil the rice noodles for a minute after soaking them for about 30. Almost no work. And then the dinner was black chicken, but this time we paired these with some dosas. I began by taking the black chicken out of the fridge and heating it in the microwave. Then I used a store-bought dosa batter to make some fluffy yet crispy dosas that go well with really any curry. If you don't have access to dosa batter, unlike here in South India, you could just eat it with roti or rice. And that there was another delicious meal for the week. Now there was a change of plan on Friday where I had to skip the meal plan and grab a quick bite outside with my family. For dinner, we did have the homemade pizza I'd planned earlier, even though I couldn't get the prep on camera. I'll keep that for the next time. Until then, take care and bye-bye.